My ex-husband thought he could humiliate me by inviting me to a conference where he planned to show off his success. What he didn't know was that the entire event, the one he bragged about, was mine. When you divorce a man like David, you don't expect kindness afterward. He had always been charming in public, but cruel in private, sharp words, belittling comments, constant reminders that he was the successful one in our marriage. We were married for 12 years. 12 years of me supporting him, editing his presentations, smoothing over his mistakes, and raising our son while he climbed the corporate ladder. And when his ego outgrew the marriage, he left, telling anyone who would listen that he traded me in for freedom. So, when I saw his name pop up in my inbox 2 years later, I almost didn't open it. But curiosity won. Melissa, the email read, "There's a major business conference happening in the city next month. I'm one of the key speakers. Though you'd like to see what real success looks like, I'll put your name on the guest list. Front row seat, David." I stared at the screen, my pulse steady, my lips curling into the faintest smile. A front row seat? Perfect. The truth David didn't know was that after our divorce, I had started my own company. Quietly, carefully, without his shadow looming over me. It began as a small consulting firm, then grew into something bigger, an entire network that brought industry leaders together. And that major business conference David was bragging about? It was my company's flagship event. I was the founder, the silent force behind the stage, the person who signed the checks and approved the contracts. David thought he was inviting me as a spectator. He didn't realize he was stepping onto my stage. Still, his arrogance cut deep. Reading his words brought back all the memories of how he used to dismiss me. "Melissa, you don't understand how business works. Melissa, leave the important stuff to me. Melissa, you're just lucky I provide for you." Back then, I stayed quiet, swallowing the insults. But not anymore. This time he had unknowingly set the stage for his own downfall. The weeks leading up to the event were tense. My team worked around the clock, finalizing schedules, confirming vendors, arranging travel for high-profile guests. I kept my role low-key, as always. Most people in the industry knew my company's name, but not my face. That was designed. On the surface, I was just another well-dressed professional moving through the crowd. Behind the scenes, I was the one pulling every string. And David was about to walk straight into it. The night before the conference, I received another email from him. "Melissa, don't be late tomorrow. You'll want a good seat when you hear my keynote. Maybe you'll finally learn something useful." Winky face. I closed my laptop slowly. He still thought of me as the woman he could mock, the woman who would sit quietly and clap politely while he basked in attention. But tomorrow, everything will change. Because tomorrow, when he stepped onto that stage, he'd realize the power he thought he had was nothing compared to mine. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments about which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. That night, I stood by my window overlooking the city. The lights of the convention center glowed in the distance, ready for the thousands of attendees who would arrive. David believed he was walking into his victory lap, but he was walking into my empire, and I was ready to watch him crumble under the weight of his own arrogance. The morning of the conference arrived with crisp air and a nervous buzz humming through the convention center. Thousands of attendees, dressed in sharp suits and polished shoes, filled the lobby, clutching programs and name badges. Cameras flashed. Reporters jotted notes. Deals were already being whispered over cups of steaming coffee. I walked through the crowd, blending in perfectly. On the surface, I was just another face in the sea of professionals. But every banner that hung from the ceiling, every stage light, every piece of decor was my design. This was my empire, built from the ground up. And somewhere in the crowd was David, thinking he was the star of the show. I spotted him near the main stage, laughing with a group of executives, his voice loud and booming. He thrived on attention, shaking hands too firmly, telling stories too loudly, making sure every eye was on him. He hadn't changed a bit. "Melissa." A voice pulled me from my thoughts. It was Clara, my event manager. She wore a sleek headset and held a clipboard, moving with practiced precision. "Everything's set for the keynote session. Do you want to sit in the control booth or stay on the floor?" I smiled. "The floor. I want to see this one up close." Clara grinned knowingly. She was one of the few who knew the whole story. "This is going to be interesting." The opening ceremony was flawless. The host welcomed the crowd, sponsors were thanked, and the schedule was laid out. Then came the announcement that made the room erupt in applause. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome one of today's keynote speakers, David Collins." He strutted onto the stage, basking in the attention. He wore a tailored navy suit, a microphone clipped neatly to his lapel, The screens behind him lit up with his name and face. Thank you, he began, raising a hand to quiet the applause. It's an honor to be here at one of the most prestigious conferences in the industry. I almost laughed. Prestige was the word he had once used to describe himself during our marriage. Now he was using it to describe my creation, not knowing I was the one who made it prestigious. He launched his speech, pacing the stage like he owned it. He bragged about his accomplishments, exaggerated his influence, and sprinkled in little jokes meant to charm the audience. And then, as expected, he took a shot at me. You know, he said with a smirk, my ex-wife used to say I talk too much. Looks like talking too much pays the bills. The audience laughed politely. He beamed, soaking it in. But what he didn't notice was me, sitting in the front row watching every move. Halfway through his talk, he started referencing the conference itself. I have to say, the organizers really outdid themselves. This event is top-notch. Whoever's behind this deserves a round of applause. The crowd clapped. I sat still, my hands folded neatly in my lap. Clara's voice crackled through her headset at the back of the room. Ready when you are. I nodded slightly. The plan was simple. Let him finish, let him bask in his self-importance, and then pull the rug out from under him in front of everyone. David wrapped up with a dramatic flourish, spreading his arms wide. Success, he declared, is about vision, confidence, and leadership. And I'm proud to say I've built my career on all three. Thunderous applause filled the room. He bowed his head, grinning smugly. As he stepped off the stage, the host returned with a smile. Thank you, Mr. Collins, for those inspiring words. And now, we'd like to take a moment to recognize someone very special, the founder and owner of this entire conference. Without her vision, none of this would exist. Please welcome Melissa Carter. The room erupted again, this time louder, more genuine. David froze mid-step, his smile collapsing. His head snapped toward the stage as if he'd misheard. But no, he hadn't. I stood up, smoothed my jacket, and walked calmly to the stage, every eye following me. His face drained of color as realization crashed over him. This wasn't his stage. It was mine. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments about which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. I reached the podium, shook the host's hand, and turned to face the audience. Behind me, David lingered in the shadows, suddenly invisible. Good morning, I began, my voice steady, amplified through the speakers. Thank you for being here at an event that began as a dream, grew through years of hard work, and today stands as a celebration of innovation and resilience. My gaze flicked to David for the briefest second. He looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. And that was only the beginning. Because now it was my turn to tell the story. The spotlight felt warm on my shoulders as I faced the crowd, but inside my chest was steady. This wasn't fear. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Behind me, the massive screens lit up, not with David's name, but with mine. Melissa Carter, founder and CEO. The audience applauded again, many of them surprised, some even whispering to each other as though a hidden truth had just been uncovered. I smiled. When I started this company, I had nothing but an idea, a laptop, and the belief that hard work could change lives. I was told I didn't have what it took. I was told I didn't belong in this space. But here we are. The applause grew. My eyes slid toward the side of the stage where David stood, his face tight, his jaw clenched. He looked like a man trapped in his own nightmare. I began to weave the story carefully, balancing inspiration with subtle precision. This event isn't just about success, I said, pacing slowly across the stage. It's about resilience. It's about refusing to let someone else define your worth. Too often, we let other voices tell us who we are. But true power, true growth, comes when we stop listening to them and start proving them wrong. The audience was locked in. Phones were out, recording, tweeting, sharing. This wasn't just a keynote anymore, it was a moment. And every word doubled as a quiet rebuke to David. Because those voices I spoke about, everyone who knew me well enough understood who I meant. David shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his tie. I could see the storm in his eyes. Confusion, anger, humiliation. He had invited me here to watch him shine, never realizing I was the one holding the light switch. I didn't call him out by name. I didn't need to. I once stood in the shadows, I continued, believing I wasn't enough, believing my work didn't matter. But the truth is, the shadows only make the light shine brighter when you step into it. Applause thundered through the hall. Some people even stood, clapping harder, moved by the conviction in my voice. David lowered himself into a chair in the front row. His posture slumped, his bravado stripped away. For the first time in years, he wasn't the center of attention. I was. But then came the moment that sealed it all. As the speech ended, the host returned with a microphone. "Thank you, Melissa. What an incredible journey. Would you stay for a short Q&A?" "Of course," I said. The first few questions came from professionals eager to learn about scaling businesses and leadership challenges. I answered with honesty, weaving in lessons I had bled for in silence, while David claimed the spotlight years ago. And then, as if fate itself wanted to twist the knife, David raised his hand. The host blinked in surprise, but nodded. "Yes, Mr. Collins?" The room turned, hundreds of eyes falling on him. He cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. "Melissa, don't you think you're exaggerating your role here? Isn't it true that you had help along the way?" Gasps rippled through the audience. It was the last desperate swing of a man about to fall. I didn't flinch. I leaned into the microphone, my smile cool but sharp. Of course I had help. Every leader does. But here's the difference, David. Help is what you get from a team you respect, not from someone you dismiss, belittle, and underestimate. The hall erupted in applause, louder than before, rolling like thunder. People weren't just clapping, they were cheering. David's face turned crimson. He sank back into his chair, shrinking, as if he wished he could vanish onto the carpet. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments about which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. I ended my keynote with a final message. Never let someone else's vision of you become your limit. If they tell you that you're not capable, use it as fuel. Let your results speak louder than their doubts. When I stepped down from the stage, people swarmed me, investors, executives, young entrepreneurs who said they were inspired. And as I shook hands, smiling at strangers who now saw me for who I truly was, I caught sight of David slinking toward the exit, his shoulders hunched, his pride shattered. He had wanted me to witness his triumph. Instead, he had walked straight into mine. The buzz of the crowd still lingered in the halls after my keynote. Attendees clustered in small groups, talking excitedly, pointing toward me, whispering words like inspiring and powerful. Every handshake, every smile, every business card slipped into my hand reminded me of how far I had come. But the higher the applause soared, the heavier the silence behind me grew. I felt it before I saw him. David, lingering in the shadows near the exit, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. I tried to walk past him, but his voice cut through the noise. "Melissa, we need to talk." I kept moving, but he followed, his shoes clicking angrily against the marble floor. "Don't walk away from me." I stopped near the corridor that led to the VIP lounge. The crowd was thinning. This was exactly what he wanted, privacy to confront me. Turning slowly, I met his eyes. "What do you want, David?" He stepped closer, his voice low, sharp. "You humiliated me in there." I raised an eyebrow. "No, you humiliated yourself. I just told the truth." His face flushed, his voice rising. "You planned this. You know I was speaking today." "Yes," I said simply, "because it's my event." The words hit him like a slap. He blinked. Disbelief etched across his face. You own this." I didn't flinch. Every banner, every stage light, every contract, it all traces back to me. While you were busy chasing applause, I was building something real. For a moment, he said nothing. His shoulders slumped slightly, the fight draining out of him. But then the anger returned, stronger, desperate. "You always wanted to outshine me," he spat. "Even when we were married. You couldn't stand being the wife of someone successful." My voice hardened. "No, David. I couldn't stand being the wife of someone who thought success gave him the right to belittle me. You mistook silence for weakness. That was your mistake." He glanced around, his voice dropping into a hiss. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me? People will laugh. They'll say I was nothing but a guest in your empire." I tilted my head. "That's because it's true." His hand twitched, as though he wanted to slam the wall, but he stopped himself. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice venomous. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. I'll make sure people know you only got here because of me, that everything you built was on my back." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Go ahead. Try. You don't realize it yet, but you've lost more than your pride today. You've lost your narrative. For the first time, people saw me. Not your version of me. The real me." His lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. Clara appeared then, her headset slightly askew, eyes narrowing at David. "Is everything all right here?" she asked firmly. "Yes," I said calmly, never breaking eye contact with him. Mr. Collins was just leaving. Her gaze lingered on him, sharp and warning, until he finally stepped back, his chest heaving with rage he could no longer release. Without another word, he turned and stormed down the corridor, his footsteps echoing like a retreat. But I knew him well enough to recognize the look in his eyes. This wasn't over. Men like David never walked away quietly. That evening, after the sessions ended, I returned to the control booth to check final reports. Everything had gone smoothly, every seat filled, every sponsor satisfied. But as I scrolled through the event's social media feed, my breath caught. There it was, a post from a fake account, already gaining traction. Don't be fooled. Melissa Carter's company was built on her ex-husband's contacts. Without him, she'd be nothing. A dozen comments followed, some questioning, others mocking. And though I knew exactly who was behind it, there was no proof. Not yet. I closed my laptop slowly, the applause of the day still ringing in my ears, but now laced with a chill. David wasn't done. And if he wanted a war, he was about to see just how ruthless I could be. By the next morning, the smear campaign had spread further. Blogs picked up the fake post, and whispers began circling through the conference halls. I walked past two attendees near the coffee station as they murmured, "Did you hear? She only made it because of her ex-husband." Really? That would explain why he was so bold yesterday. I tightened my grip on my notebook. It was David's voice all over again, resurrected through strangers' mouths. He had humiliated me in private for years, and now he wanted to do it in public. But he underestimated me again. I wasn't going to defend myself with frantic denials or desperate explanations. I was going to use the one weapon David never had, truth backed by proof. That afternoon, I called an emergency press briefing in one of the smaller halls. My staff scrambled to prepare the space, setting up microphones and screens. Word spread quickly, and by the time I walked to the podium, the room was full of reporters, sponsors, and even attendees curious about the sudden announcement. And, of course, David. He slipped near the back, arms crossed, a smug look plastered across his face. He thought he had forced me into a corner. I took a breath and began. "I understand there have been questions about the foundation of my company," I said calmly, my voice carrying through the microphones. "So, I'd like to be transparent with all of you today." The screens flickered to life behind me, displaying old bank statements, business registrations, and contracts, all filed in my name, long before the divorce. Every cent of startup capital came from my savings. Every contract signed bore my name. The growth you see today was built on long nights, sacrifice, and persistence, not handouts. I let the documents roll across the screens. The room was silent except for the clicking of cameras. "And as for the claim that I relied on my ex-husband's contacts," I continued, "you'll find that the opposite is true. For years, I was the silent partner, writing pitches, creating presentations, opening doors for him. But when I started this company, I made the choice to build from scratch. That's why many of the same executives who once shook his hand are now standing here as my partners." A ripple of nods passed through the room. David shifted uncomfortably in the back, his smugness cracking. Then I turned to the crowd with a small, deliberate smile. "Let me be clear. This event, this company, this vision, it was never about proving myself to him. It was about proving to myself, and to every person who's ever been underestimated, that resilience wins. And yesterday's keynote was not a coincidence. It was a reminder. You cannot silence someone forever. Eventually, the truth finds the microphone." The room erupted to applause. This wasn't polite clapping, it was roaring, unstoppable, rising like a wave that drowned out every lie. And in that sound, David finally disappeared. Reporters surrounded me after the briefing, firing off questions, shaking my hand, asking about the company's future. My staff moved quickly to filter them, but not before I caught sight of David slipping out of the room, his face pale, his head low. For once, he had no comeback. That night, as the conference ended, I stood on the main stage alone, the banners glowing in the dim light. My phone buzzed with dozens of messages from investors and young entrepreneurs, thanking me for my transparency. The smear campaign had collapsed under the weight of hard evidence. And David? By the next morning, the same blogs that had carried his lies were now publishing the truth. Headline after headline about his failed attempt to discredit me. Sponsors quietly distanced themselves from him. His name, once spoken with admiration, now carried the weight of ridicule. Before we close, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments about which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. As I left the convention center for the last time that week, I looked back at the building glowing in the evening light. My building. My legacy. David had invited me here to watch him shine, certain that I'd sit in silence. Instead, he'd been forced to watch me rise higher than he ever imagined. And in the end, I realized something. Humiliation only works if you give someone the power to define you. I had taken that power back, and I would never give it away again.